Hey, Andy Wang. It's Chris Curran from Podcast Engineering School. Congrats, man. 100 episodes. This is a great accomplishment for you. I really like your show, Inspired Money, and you're really helping a lot of people about how to think about money, how to plan for the future, how to set themselves up for a successful life. It's amazing. I love it. What else are you going to do in this world besides help people with this stuff? I guess there's a lot of other things we do. Have some fun, chill. But Andy, you're doing a great job. I really appreciate you, man. Here's to 100 more, and then I'll leave you another. Then I'll record another piece of audio for you for 200, and wish you another 200 more. Then you go to 400, and then 400. Then you go to 1600, and then 6400. Okay, you see the math? Is that how investing math works? All right. Congrats, brother. See ya.
Good morning. In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
I can't believe it. This is episode 100. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wang, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If it's your first time listening, welcome. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to help each other to live richer lives, make a greater impact, and together, make the world a better place. Thank you so much for listening and being an Inspired Moneymaker. It means so much to me to have you here, and I appreciate you. To change things up, I'm giving you an abbreviated intro. No highlights about what you will learn, and here's the twist. I'm turning the reins of the show over to my friend, Jared Morris, who you should recognize from episode 99. To refresh your memory, Jared, along with Johnny Nastor, are the showrunner, a podcast about podcasting from two guys with over 1,500 episodes of experience. That's a long way from my 100. So let's get inspired with me, not your host today, Andy Wang.
All right, so Andy, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm excited to have you on the show. A little bit of a role reversal from the last time we talked, huh?
Yeah, it's exciting to be here. It feels weird to be on this side of the microphone.
That's right. You are on the other side. Which, and by the way, I think this is such a great idea to do for your 100th episode. So I want to thank you and let you know that I'm really honored that you asked me to do this. I've been really looking forward to it. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing, because after doing 99 episodes, I mean, your audience has obviously gotten to know you well through those episodes, but now they can get to know you even better. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Likewise. Well, thank you. If you do a really good job, maybe you'll have a sixth podcast that you can take that you can add to your resume.
Now, that's the great thing I think about hosting a podcast is it becomes so much yours. Like, you are the person who hosts Inspired Money, and I don't think there's anybody who could do it better, because this is your show, it's your baby, it's your voice behind it, your passion behind it. And, so there's no one who can do this better than you. That's why your audience comes and listens to it with you doing it. So that to me is one of the greatest things about a podcast, is just how personal and intimate it is. So I'm sure your audience has gotten that same feeling over these first 99 episodes, and hopefully it continues here into episode number 100.
Well, it certainly is a reflection of me. Like episode 100, I've had a little time to be kind of introspective. And I was thinking about that this morning. I was thinking about how every guest, it is like a unique lens, that it's either somebody that I knew or somebody that I ran into or somebody that I heard about. And no doubt that it is a reflection of who I am. Yeah, it's really interesting in that way.
It is. All right, well, let's jump right in, and we'll start with the question that we have to start with here. What is your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I thought about this. I think it was like somewhere around episode 10 that I started thinking about, well, how would I answer that question? And so I have two. One is I would get like Chinese New Year money or birthday money, as gifts. So I distinctly remember my mom taking me to the bank, opening up a savings account, and getting my passbook. So by the time I had deposited $100, I was really excited to see interest. There would be like 3 or 4 cents on my passbook. And in recent years, when we have a zero interest rate policy, kids today don't get that. But I remember having that kind of message that when you save, the bank will pay you, like you would be rewarded for that. And then I have a second memory, which was when my parents sold their car. We had this Oldsmobile station wagon with the wood panels on the side, with the back seat all the way in the rear that would face backward. And when they sold that car, a woman bought it and came over to the house, paid $850 in cash. So I remember having that wad of money, and like that was the most money I had ever seen.
Oh man, and in cash too.
In cash, yeah. And we kind of like, my brother and I laid the money out on the floor next to our cat. We actually have pictures of that somewhere, with the cat like holding this cash.
Oh man.
So who knew? Maybe if I published that on Facebook, it could go viral with all the cat images or cat videos, but I have to dig that out.
Cat and cash. Yeah, you got two of the variables there that you often see when things go viral. So, okay, so that story is interesting because you mentioned your brother. Now, your brother is part of the family business, right? He's part of Runnymede?
He is, yeah. I work with my brother, see him every workday.
So tell me about kind of how the family business came about and what it's like working in a family business like that and working so closely with your father and your brother.
Well, I will say that it was never planned. I never planned to be a part of the family business. My dad worked at the Bank of New York, so he was director of research there for 10 years. He was very successful in his corporate career. He was the first he was the youngest senior vice president at the bank at age 28, and he was director of the research department. So in that time, he would travel visiting companies, and these companies would have this kid show up because he looked really young. They were like, why is the bank sending this kid? And he's like, I'm the director of research. So my dad set up the company in 1993 after his career at the bank. I never planned to join. After college, I went up to Boston with my now wife, and we were working up there. And eventually I did end up coming back to work with my dad. And then my brother, similarly, he graduated from college and had a job in New York City. He also did not expect to come into the family business, but he joined in 2003. I joined in 1998, 1999. So a little time has passed. I'm in like year 20. And I think it's really special that we all work together, that we get to spend time together. And my father is really kind of a renowned investor. He was managing money for the Dow Jones profit sharing plan back in 1987. He had institutional and individual clients. And when Black Monday came, the market crash in October of 1987, my dad got a lot of publicity for having sold stocks ahead of the crash. And because the Dow Jones profit sharing plan was a client, they wrote articles about him, like in the Wall Street Journal and Barron's, since the Dow Jones owned Barron's. And he was on the cover of CFO magazine. It was pretty wild. So I feel privileged to work with my dad and to have this teacher to teach me about investing and about money. Working in the family business is just really nice because we don't have the office politics of a large organization.
Yeah.
Like we come to work and we know what we're supposed to be doing. We all kind of have different gifts and talents and kind of gravitate to different things. So I do a little bit more of the marketing and client service. My brother is more research and portfolio management. My dad kind of does a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's a lot of fun spending time with the family and not having to worry, what is the person sitting next to you? What are they up to? Are they jockeying for a raise or something? We don't have to worry about that.
So you said you had never planned on joining the family business. Were you always in finance? Like, were you always going to have a career in finance and just maybe thought you were going to work somewhere else? Or were you in something completely different before you joined?
In college, I was in a punk rock band. So my father was always worried.
You and Johnny Nastor.
Yeah. I was like in this punk rock ska band in college. And my dad was always worried that I wanted to become like a starving musician somewhere.
Yeah.
So after college, I moved up to Boston. I was working at Thomson Financial Services, which was a financial information company. I worked for a computer parts trading company. And that was really interesting because I was working the graveyard shift for 2 years. All my customers were in Asia. So I was working from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. calling Japan, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Korea. And that was an adventure. I mean, we had about 20 of us on that shift and very interesting characters willing to take the graveyard shift. And we would call people in Asia, and their first question was, "You're calling from America. What time is it there?" And I'd say 4 a.m. And their reaction was like, "Why? Why are you doing that?"
A job like that has to be so disruptive to your personal life. You were with your wife at the time, right?
I was, yeah. And
was she working normal hours?
She was working normal hours.
Oh, my.
My shift was 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Monday night, and then Thursday morning at 6 a.m. I'd be done. So I'd have the rest of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'd go back to work Monday night at 8 p.m. And I would try, well, I didn't try. I would flip back to daytime hours over the weekends.
Wow, that had to be hard.
Yeah, I mean, I like doctors and nurses, that's kind of part of their routine. But for me, I mean, I really liked that job and I had fun doing that job. But my father hated me working at nights. And I think that it does have a negative impact on your body, for sure.
Yeah.
So it was at that time, it was about 1998, and there was the Asian crisis happened. And my father was going to all these meetings on Wall Street with different experts, economists and strategists. And at that time, they were saying this Asian crisis, the economy sort of crashing in Asia, and some of the currencies losing value. They were speculating that it could take a decade for these Asian economies to recover. So my dad called me and said, if your customers, who were like manufacturing companies and computer companies like Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Compaq Computer, if the Asian crisis really does take 10 years to recover, my dad said, it's not a good place to be, doing business because there's just not going to be much demand. So it was through those types of conversations that eventually my dad said, oh, maybe you should come join me. And that's what I did. So I celebrate not having to have those hours anymore. It was rough. And in retrospect, I feel like my memory is not as good as it used to be. Who knows? Maybe I'm just getting old and it has nothing to do with the graveyard shift. But I feel like a little bit, it did wreak havoc on my brain.
Yeah. Has your dad ever been on the podcast?
He has not.
Have you thought about bringing him on for an episode?
Yeah, I've thought about it. I've considered having him on as well as my brother, and neither have been on as guests. So I've got like the next 100 episodes to make that happen.
I'm wondering, okay, so I mean, hopefully you'll actually get an answer to this question because you have him on at some point, but if he were on here, what do you think would be, and you asked him for advice to share with your listeners, what do you think would be the one or two biggest pieces of advice he would give people about how to manage their finances better, how to manage their money better, or just how to think about money?
Yeah, I think quite clearly, I think that his advice would be kind of two things. One is that quality matters. Like when it comes to investing, sometimes he uses an analogy like when you're shopping for a car. Like, do you want to own a Mercedes or BMW, or do you want to own a Yugo, if you remember the Yugos? That quality matters. Like if you own a high quality car, that in the long run, that should mean that it's more reliable and less maintenance and things to be fixed. And investing's the same. If you find great companies that are managed by executives who have a track record of knowing what they're doing to grow a company, those are the types of companies that you want to own for a long time. Sometimes it's like tortoise versus the hare, because it is far more tempting to be standing around the water cooler at work and somebody says, oh, I heard about this new technology and it's going to be the next big thing. Like all of us, it's hard not to get drawn into that story and go for the long shot. But in investing, the boring story is often better. Like you want the reliable thing that's going to last a long time. You don't want the flash in the pan. You don't want something that is very volatile and you don't know if it's going to be around. Even though the promise of hitting a home run, it draws us in. But you're a sports guy. I think that with your money, it's like hitting singles and doubles. That's how you win games.
Yeah.
And the same should be done with your money. The second thing my dad is big on is to win is not to lose. In his career at the bank, he did a lot of research on market cycles. And I mentioned that in 1987, he had sold a lot of stocks ahead of the market crash. So he is a big believer that you should do homework to try to define what is the risk at any given moment in time, because it's like the weather. If there is a storm forecasted, like a hurricane alert, it's good to sometimes evacuate. It is good to take precautions, to board up your house, to protect yourself, and then wait and see. If the storm passes, then it's okay. You go back outside. And that goes counter to what a lot of the industry conventional wisdom is, which is just to stay invested at all times, which historically works. But in bad times, you lose a lot of sleep. Like there are other negative impacts of having your investment portfolio go down a lot.
Yeah. In your experience, like you said, you do a lot of client services work. And I suppose I'm probably asking this question selfishly, kind of looking at it from my own perspective. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make with their money that you really try to help them overcome? Like, and that, like if everybody who's listening, if you could be like, okay, this one mistake, don't make this mistake that you see so many people make, what would it be?
I think it's doing your best to remove the emotion from your decision making, because we're all emotional. And, oftentimes like pulling the trigger to either buy something or sell something, inertia is like our biggest enemy. It's like you don't look at your money. You don't look at your 401k plan, and it doesn't take care of itself. Like you need to make time to address it, to look at it, to talk about it, which is part of my motivation for the Inspired Money podcast. Like I want to talk to all kinds of interesting people, but to have money discussed like in a positive way, just to motivate people to say, hey, money is not the most interesting thing, but the reality is that we all have to live with money and we need to save money for retirement. So my hope is through having some of these conversations on the podcast that it will motivate people to say, hey, wait a minute, I better look at my 401k plan. I haven't looked at it in a while. But yeah, getting back to your question, I think it's emotion. How can you be disciplined in making decisions about your investing and your finances? Because usually emotion doesn't help you with timing.
Yeah. So you mentioned the podcast, and you kind of mentioned there, a deeper purpose for why you wanted to start the podcast. And this is the 100th episode. So let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, what were the reasons why you started this podcast? And, as you now kind of reflect back on 100 episodes, what's been the most rewarding part of the experience, and what's been the most challenging part of the experience? As a fellow podcaster, I think I know what the second part of that answer is going to be.
Yeah, well, I tell people that I feel like I was a latecomer to podcasting in that 2 years ago when I launched, or almost 2 years ago, it wasn't like the early Wild West days. There are those who started in 2005, 2006, and they were really pioneers. I was not a pioneer. I came into podcasting because of the popularity of Serial. I think I had two different cousins who asked me, are you listening to Serial? And I said, what's that? And then they told me, and I kind of got sucked in. That was the first podcast that I downloaded.
That's how my wife got into it.
Oh, your wife did too?
Same thing. Yeah, Serial. I've been telling her about it, and Serial finally got her into it.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. I got into it, and then once I binge listened to whatever episodes had been published already, then I started searching for other things. And I just loved the podcast medium. I loved that I could listen on demand to shows that I wanted to listen to. So as a business owner, I was looking for business podcasts, shows about salesmanship or how to run your business better, small business. So I reached a point where it was probably a year or two of listening. And then one day I said to myself, I really love this podcasting medium, and I understand that to have the podcaster's voice in your earbuds, it really is intimate. As a listener, you're listening on a regular basis, and you're consuming the entire podcast episode most of the time. And my brother and I had been business blogging for our company. So the idea was to create a podcast to complement our blogging content marketing.
And what's been the most rewarding part of it so far?
The most rewarding part of it is the podcast is a platform to reach out and talk to all kinds of interesting people. Without the podcast, I would not be able to have these conversations at all. Who am I as an individual to reach out to someone and say, hey, can I talk to you for 45 minutes?
Yeah.
No, they all say no. They're like, well, who are you? But the podcast as a platform, that's the biggest thing gained, because suddenly with the show, with an audience, I'm offering something of value to that person because they want to share with an audience. They don't want to just share with me as an individual. So because of that, there's tremendous value there. I mean, to answer your other question first, like what's the negative or what are the drawbacks?
Just challenges.
Yeah, challenges. It's time.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife continues to ask me, is it worth it? Like, is it worth producing the podcast every week? You know, maybe I should do every 2 weeks. You know, she has questioned me. She's like, you know, you do have to take a look to see what is the opportunity cost. And she sees me like on a Monday night staying up late because I haven't planned ahead, and I'm editing late into the evening so that I can publish, get the show out by Tuesday morning. And actually this year I've had some Wednesday mornings where I said, okay, I could get it out Tuesday morning, but the quality will be better if I wait a day. And I don't know, I've kind of made a game of it, like in my mind. I'm like, I want to get the show out weekly, and I want to make sure that I can keep that up for as long as I can. But yeah, it's time. I mean, it's very time consuming being a showrunner and doing everything from booking guests to doing the research for the interviews to conducting the interviews, and then I edit. Then there's promotion, right? But I am thinking about, I think I will outsource the editing at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. What was your dad's reaction when you said that you wanted to start a podcast? And does he listen? Do you know?
He does listen. My brother and I are still trying to explain to my father what a blog is. And we've been doing that for probably over 4 years now. He doesn't quite understand like the rationale, other than he does see the benefit because we will get some inbound calls, whether it's the blog or the podcast. It's like someone's calling into the office and he sees that and he says, oh, that's great. And we explain to him, like, all right, you know, you're giving information away for free. You're giving content away for free for increased brand awareness, to get our name out and answering people's potential questions. And then they find us. And that's how like the internet works today. And that's how businesses work today. But yeah, so he does listen to the podcast, and he tells me that, you know, he'll tell me if he found an episode interesting or if he liked it. But I'm not certain that he always understands why I'm publishing the podcast. Or he also doesn't wrap his head around that there's a new one every week.
Oh.
Like if I go into his office after this call, I'll tell him, I just recorded the 100th episode. He'll be like, wow, there are 100? I had no idea.
That's kind of how my parents are with my podcast.
Well, that's the funny thing about podcasting and family members. I mean, to get family to listen is like much harder than that most people would think going into it. But you can't force them.
Yeah, my wife used to listen to my Indiana basketball show when we first got together, and that slowly petered out, and now she doesn't have time for it anymore.
I think that my wife has only listened to one episode in its entirety, but she also gives me the most honest feedback.
Yes, hey, you know what? That is the great part about having a spouse like that.
Yes.
You do get some great honest feedback.
She will tell me how it is. She tells me, you are speaking weirdly. She's like, you're speaking too slowly. You need to speak more naturally. You don't talk like that normally. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Man, you know, and it's like, it's funny. It's kind of a chuckle, haha thing, but man, that's so valuable to have someone like that who can give you that advice.
That's very valuable. Well, it's fun. I mean, I kind of laugh, but yes, when my wife tells me that I did a good job, that means a lot.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't say that every day.
Yeah, that's huge praise.
The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/100. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more or get links for things mentioned in this episode. In lieu of the regularly scheduled Runnymede Tip of the Week, here are some messages from our friends, past guests, and listeners.
Hey Andy, it's Tim.
And it's Amy from Go With Less.
We're calling in from Milan, Italy to wish you a happy 100th episode.
Congratulations! We hope there are hundreds more in your future. We can't wait to hear them. Arrivederci.
Hey Andy, this is Joe Salsihai from the Stacking Benjamins podcast. 100 episodes. Well, I want to first congratulate you on 100 because that's quite a milestone. We know, just because of how great the first 100 are, that this is just the tip of the spear, and you've got so much great stuff coming out. Now, you asked specifically of me a question like, what was my most favorite episode? I'd have to say it's that guy on episode 26, the guy talking about comedy and play. He was just brilliant and charming, probably very good looking too, was just an amazing guest. But seriously, you know what? Picking from this great group, whether it's Kade Corder, who was awesome, Shannon McClay, I loved, Adam Draper was fantastic, Jen Hemphill, Cliff Ravenscraft. I like so many of them. Thank you for motivating us and for keeping us truly inspired. And here's to a long, long future for Inspired Money.
Hey there, Andy. It's Eric Hunley. I just wanted to say congratulations on your 100 episodes. I think your show's fantastic, and I feel really honored to have gotten to know you over this time, and I look forward to everything you are creating in the future and working with you in the future. Congrats again.
Congratulations on Inspired Money's 100th episode. I feel honored to have been a guest and to call Andy Wang my friend. As a 30-year marketing communications veteran, what inspires me is learning from others through reading, listening to podcasts, attending events, and always open to new opportunities. I'd like to give a special thanks to Deidre Breckenridge, who introduced me to Andy. Andy is engaging. His special gift is having a deep understanding of people and helping them to tell their story. My most inspired money story is when I spoke with Andy during our podcast. Andy was the first person ever to bring out my personal story in a business situation. Inspired Money bridges the gap between top money makers, thought leaders, brands, startups, and consumers across a wide variety of industries by emphasizing the need to make a difference in the world. Everyone has a story to tell. Thank you, Andy, for helping the world become a better place.
Hey, Andy, it's Wayne Charles. Congratulations on episode 100. Yikes. I cannot believe it. Yeah, and I want you to continue this podcast because it's a great resource for all of us out there. So congratulations on episode 100. Thanks, Andy. Bye.
Hey, it's Rocky from Richer Soul. I love the Inspired Money podcast. It's not about the money, but about the inspiring life you can lead because of it. I don't hear the same people as on all the other money shows, but rather people who are doing more, making a difference, and creating life bigger than themselves, thereby making the world a better place. I always learn a nugget that I can use to improve my life and help others. My favorite episode was with Zach Penn because I love the book Ready Player One. And I know how hard it must be to get the story from the book to the screen. It was cool learning the backstory and how they work together to make it happen and ensure that the movie watcher has the same great experience as reading the book. Congrats, Andy, on episode 100. Wow, so many stories you've shared, and I can't wait to hear what's next.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for your messages. It's great to hear from you and have you be a part of this 100th episode. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Do you have any questions or comments? Schedule a 15-minute call with me at inspiredmoney.fm/15. That's inspiredmoney.fm/15. I'd love to chat with you. You're listening to Inspired Money with Jared Morris. I'm Andy Wang.
So as you look back on these 99 episodes, you know, episode 1 was Jim Chemo West. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yep.
Yeah, and then, you know, episode 98, you had Kevin Kelton. I was your guest for episode 99. As you reflect back on all of these episodes, what kind of lessons, what moments, what stories stick out that you've gotten from your guests? Any in particular off the top of your head?
Oh yeah, there are tons.
Okay, what of those, what do you think is the most quintessential inspired money moment or story? Like the one that if you were going to send this out and say, you know, if someone was like, you know, what is inspired money about? Give me a taste of it. What clip would you send them?
Oh gosh, you know, I feel like there are so many, and what I love, it's like the second part to answering what about the podcast is so good. And like my first answer was that I like having the platform to have these conversations. But the second part of that is that I feel like I learned something from every episode. And that's why I love having these conversations. I have an eagerness to keep improving and that it's never too late. Like wherever you are, you can start today and make progress for a better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So when I look at past guests, like there's just a variety of people that I've talked to, and they all bring something a little bit different. Like one of my favorites is episode 17 with Colin O'Brady, and that's because I'm so impressed by his achievements. He's a 4-time world record holder. He's an endurance athlete. So, I mean, his story is crazy. After graduating from college, he was traveling around the world. We did get to talk about how growing up, he didn't grow up with a lot of money. So that's part of the reason why he wanted to take this trip around the world. It was like timing, right? After school, many of his classmates were going to Wall Street or into management consulting and getting paid high salaries. And he chose to travel. He went to Asia, but in a freak accident, he got burned in rural Thailand and burned his legs very badly to the point where the doctors were saying that he may never walk normally again. He might need a cane. And he was like a student athlete. So that was devastating for him. He was worried that he's like, how can I live? He's like, he was a swimmer and a soccer player growing up. He's like, it's such an important part of his life. And fast forward, he wanted to compete in the triathlon and ended up winning the Chicago Triathlon, which is nuts.
Wow. It's amazing.
Became a professional triathlete, and then from there completed the Explorer's Grand Slam, which is summiting the 7 highest mountains of each continent, in addition to doing like a North and South Pole expedition. So the takeaway from his crazy achievements and adventures is that if you make small goals, like you have to make a big audacious goal, but then it's making small ones, just marching toward the big one. Like you never know if you will actually make it to the big one, but just keep setting those small goals with the big goal in mind, because you may actually surprise yourself. And he has reached that goal like time and time again. And last December, he set his 4th world record by becoming the first person to walk across Antarctica unassisted. So he had to have a sled with like a couple 100 pounds of equipment and walk like, I don't know how many miles per day through terrible conditions. And he became the first human being to do that. There are so many lessons there. That is one of the highlights for me, just because I just can't even wrap my head around the things that he achieves.
Yeah, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
But so many. I mean, you mentioned Jim Chemo West. I mean, that was episode 1. He just does what he loves. He mentioned that he'd be playing music even if he weren't doing it as a career. He'd be sitting in his living room playing music. But as luck would have it, that's what he gets paid to do. And he's been Weird Al Yankovic's guitarist for...
That's awesome.
I don't know, over 30 years.
Man, I grew up listening to Weird Al.
Me too. I'm going to go see them on Saturday because they're going to be in New York.
Oh,
and
wow.
I will go see them perform, and I'll hopefully get to hang out with Chemo for a while after the show.
Now, did you guys have a relationship before the podcast?
We did. He and I share a common love for Hawaiian music. And because of Hawaiian guitar, he and I met online and traded emails, and that's how we became friends.
Gotcha. And I wanted to ask you about music because, music is important to you. You mentioned you were in the punk rock band. I've seen video. I think you were playing, was it Somewhere Over the Rainbow that you were playing?
I was playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow on the ukulele at Podcast Movement 2018.
So music is obviously important to you. What role does it play in your life? And how, as busy as you are with the podcast and with family and with work and everything, how do you nurture that love for music?
Yeah, the music is just something that it's just brought me happiness and contentment. It's a great way to relieve stress. It's taught me so many things because I don't know why, but since like maybe 7th grade, I developed like the worst stage fright, whether it was giving a presentation, public speaking, and then later on as I was playing music, same thing. My hands would shake. I would get a stomach ache. Like I was petrified to play in front of a crowd, but the music kind of taught me that you just have to keep at it, embrace the process, because the more you face your fear, it subsides and you can overcome it. So yeah, that one of the biggest lessons for me. Whereas there was a point where I could not play a song in front of people. Like I've gone on to play in front of a crowd of, 400 people or something by myself, just me and acoustic guitar. I was still petrified, but I could do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. The fear never goes away. You just kind of learn how to manage it or how to embrace it, how to hug it,
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, sometimes, yes, sometimes the fear doesn't go away. And other times I get up there and I don't feel the fear at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've reached the point where my brain is just comfortable. Like I don't mind the people there and I'm just going to go. And other times I do feel like the tension before going out and I'm like, all right, it's going to be fine. But yeah, occasionally I don't feel it at all. Like I do embrace the opportunity to share what I know and just to go do it.
How have you changed since you launched the podcast?
Well, I still say and like way too much, but it's better.
Don't we all? That's good. Does your wife ever get on you about that? I hear about that one.
She does not. Well, she hasn't listened to enough episodes.
Oh, that's true. She's only listened to the one. That's true.
Yeah, it's funny because she's only listened to the episode where I interviewed Ryan Serhant from $1 Million Listing New York, because she and I would watch that TV show on Bravo together. So when that happened, she was like, oh, I'm going to listen to that episode. The thing about the podcast, I feel like because I learn something myself from every podcast episode that gets recorded, I get to have these conversations and I get to reach out to people who are like authorities in whatever it is that they do. Like they've reached some point of success, which is why they're kind of on my radar. Of course, I'm going to improve. Like I think my speaking improves. I think that storytelling improves. There are so many like immeasurable benefits. When I'm sitting there at night by myself, I say it's worth doing just for doing it. I love that people are listening who are not related to me. That's always like the highest compliment, right? When you hear from somebody and you're like, my gosh, I don't know you. And you're listening to the show. This is fantastic. Which tomorrow I'm going to meet up with somebody from California who had taken me up on my offer to have a 15-minute phone call on the podcast. And he called me and we had a conversation. And it turns out that he's going to be in New York. So I'm going to meet him for a drink tomorrow. So I'm really excited about that.
That's cool. Those moments are so much fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really do feel like there are so many benefits that it's worth doing the show, even if there were no audience. I am eternally grateful that people are listening. And of course, that keeps me going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tell people that even if there were 0 listeners, I feel like I would still do it. And to that, somebody very wisely responded, yes, but if that's the case, then you don't need to edit. And I said, touche. I said, okay, well, you got me there.
But you can have both, though. There are people listening, so you want to give them the best product possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, when you asked me to be a guest, you know, I mean, it was obviously a great honor because I love your show and it was great to be able to go on. But you kind of prepped me with a couple of questions that you asked. And one of the questions that you asked was, how do you define success? And it was great because, you know, I wanted to give you a good answer, not some long meandering answer. And so I really kind of sat down to think about it. And I found that time so rewarding to actually kind of crystallizing it, clarifying it. You know, success is like an easy thing, like we kind of think we know, but it's like when you really have to drill it down, okay, how do I specifically define success? It is really beneficial to kind of go through that process and get that. So I love that you ask your guests that. I have to imagine other guests have kind of had that same experience. And I'm excited now to be able to turn the tables on you and ask that question to you, because I imagine you've had plenty of time to think about it. How do you define success?
Well, it's a moving target. I think that certainly as I interview different people, they kind of help to shape how I define success, because that's part of the gift of speaking to so many successful people in all kinds of different things, whether it's an entrepreneur building something or it's somebody who's in the nonprofit space giving money away. I see things from different perspectives. So I think firstly, it's about relationships. So it's family and friends and colleagues, and it's about contentment, like whatever that means to you. You know, we talked about my playing music as a hobby, like playing Hawaiian music. I am not Hawaiian. I did not grow up in Hawaii. So for me to be able to represent a culture that's not my own, and I've had the privilege of having sort of cultural experts and practitioners from Hawaii who have said that it's okay for me to share this music. Like, that's a gift. Yeah. Like, to me, that's success. Like, contentment, the relationships, and money's kind of third. It's like, we all need money in modern society, but it's about having enough to have flexibility. Well, you need enough money to help form meaningful relationships and pursue the things that you want to pursue. I love this quote. I saw it today from Margaret Bonanno, and she said, being rich is having money, being wealthy is having time.
Well said.
For me, success is like, you need to have enough money, but you need to have your priorities. It's like, you need to make time to think about it, because you need to identify what matters to you. And in that way, by defining success, then it's like you have some benchmark. Like, you know where you're going or where you want to go.
Yeah. What do you enjoy doing with your time? I mean, we talked about music. Obviously, you know, your listeners have gotten to know what you do professionally, and clearly you spend a lot of time doing this podcast. We know that. When you have free time, what other things do you like doing?
Well, I have 3 kids. I have 3 young kids. They are 11, 9, and 7.
Is that your way of saying that you don't have free time?
Yes, I don't have free time. We don't have enough time. And that's the thing, that it's like we can't buy more. You can't sell it. You can't store it. So it is like the most valuable thing. In my free time, like, I want to spend it with my family. I want to spend it with my kids, because we know that they're growing up so quickly. Like, the time is so fleeting. Mm-hmm. I cannot believe that my oldest is 11. Like, that blows my mind. And that she's going to be turning 12 later this year. I mean, she's like a tween, right? She's going to be a teenager soon. And when I just extrapolate, it doesn't take much that soon she will be driving and like looking at colleges. I want to spend my free time with them while they're young and while we're doing all kinds of fun things together. And when I'm just sitting in my living room by myself, I pick up the guitar and start strumming something just because that does bring me contentment. Yeah, spend time with my wife, spend time with my kids, spend time with my parents and my brother who I work with. As I said, it's about relationships, whether it's your family, your friends, your community. I think that that's really what matters at the end of the day. And, when you read about longevity, those places on earth where people live until they're into their hundreds, like they always talk about the importance of community and family and relationships. So for me, I think that is so important.
So what's next for the podcast? As I've certainly learned, 100 episodes is a big milestone for any podcaster because the vast majority don't make it there. It requires, so much commitment and so much enthusiasm for the project to get there. And a lot of times you really see people kind of take off after 100. And, sometimes you see maybe a change of direction or a little pivot. What is next for you? And what is next for this podcast as we move forward?
Well, you and Johnny Nastor are the showrunners. Like, what do you equate 100 episodes to be? Is that like graduating from high school?
It's probably a pretty good way to put it. Yeah. It's
early yet. 100 is a lot, but it's still...
It is a lot. Now, granted, there are... shows out there that have 500, that have 1,000 episodes, but I don't know what the stats are, but I have to think, what's the number? There have been 700,000 podcasts put out there on Apple. My guess is that 5% of them have gotten to 100 episodes. I would say maybe less than that. So, already, you're in really rare company and have just so many reps, that's, really it's true with anything, just like it's true with podcasting or sports or, probably investing too. You get better with reps the more that you do it. And what I've found, and I guess really, what I want to ask you is I've found that with all the shows that I've done, you go into it with a certain conception of what the show is going to be and who the show is going to be for. And then you put it out there and you let it interact with an audience. And you interact with the show and with the guests, and you come out 100 episodes later and some of those notions that you had at the beginning have changed. Have any of those changed for you in terms of what the show is about or who is it for? And do you see that manifesting itself in the direction that you want to take it moving forward? Or have you even thought that far ahead? Sometimes you get in the grind and it's hard to think that far ahead about it.
I feel like I'm always trying to think about how is it going to evolve? And I never have the answer because I feel like while there are some analytics, it's pretty opaque. Like I can see downloads, but I don't know what the demographics of the listeners are outside of if I hear from someone, which happens, but happens way too infrequently. Like I wish that I could hear from more listeners through those conversations, get a better feel for who's out there listening. So in that light, I will invite the listener, if you're listening to this right now, that you can go to inspiredmoney.fm/15 and we can have a 15-minute conversation because I do want to hear from you and I want to understand who you are and more about you. When I look at which episodes have performed well, in many cases, it's pretty concrete value for, it's like Lane Kawaoka, who I spoke to pretty recently, and he's a real estate investor making passive income. That show performed well in pretty short order. I know that people want sort of actionable, like whether they're doing a side hustle or trying to make money, they like that. The other positive feedback that I've heard from listeners is that they do like the positive aspect of the show and they like the variety of guests that I have on the show. Fast forwarding for the next 100 episodes, I'm challenged as the host how can I find new guests that bring value and interesting stories that are worth listening to? And I feel like that's a big responsibility. And I don't always have the answer because I don't know who's going to be next. But I can say this. With each documentary that I watch on TV, I'm thinking about, wow, that person would be a really great guest for the show. I want to find great guests to feature and invite, and hopefully some will say yes.
Do you have a bucket list of like a guest bucket list, either written down or in your head? Like just the 2 or 3, like if you could interview anybody, 2 or 3 names that would be at the top of your list.
Kind of, sort of, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, certainly I have like some people that have been like all along since I started. I'm like, oh yeah, I want that person on my show. And I don't know. Many of them I have not reached out to. I mean, as a personal finance or business show, yeah, I want to talk to like Warren Buffett.
Hey, well, now you've got a better pitch because now it's Inspired Money. We just passed 100 episodes. That adds some gravitas to the invitation.
Well, with your 5% estimation, it is a much more elite group than I realized.
Yeah, you should even say that. Yeah, only 5% of podcasts reach this point. Asterisk. Jared Morris said this on a podcast. I have no idea if it's actually true.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the beauty of the internet. We can just make up our own facts.
Yes. So last question for you. John and I, we often, like an issue that some podcasters have is that, before they even do an episode, they buy all the gear and they invest thousands of dollars and, kind of go all out. And, our philosophy has always been, you should kind of earn that stuff, like earn kind of the ability to invest in a great microphone because you've gone so far with your show and you've put in the time and you're really going to stick with it. You pass 100 episodes, to me, that's clearly a sign that you are in this to win this. You're in it for the long haul. You mentioned earlier that you're thinking about starting to outsource editing. Are there any other ways that you're going to, commemorate this 100th episode or, maybe reinvest into the show after 100 episodes? Is there any new gear that you're going to get? Any other ways that, for you, maybe not in a way that an audience member would notice, but that for you as the showrunner of this show, that you're going to, any steps that you're going to take now that you've hit that 100th episode?
It's an excellent question. Gear-wise for me, I hope I'm not buying anything new, but I'm in a unique position because most of the gear that I use, I owned already as a musician.
You musicians always have a leg up on us when it comes to podcasting. You guys always have all the gear already.
I have a very close friend who is such a gearhead for music stuff, not for podcasting stuff. And he tries every piece of gear and is always trying to get me to buy something new. I have to keep like this filter where I say no for as long as I can, but inevitably I give in and I do buy some stuff. That's one thing about the podcast that I'm grateful. I had all this equipment that was not being used very often. So now with the podcast, I'm using it much more frequently than I was before because I have still yet to record a music CD, which is why I bought a lot of this gear in the first place.
Ooh, could that be next?
Maybe.
Okay. I'll buy it. So you will have a customer if you record an album.
Thank you. I will work on that. We'll see what happens. Certainly keeping up a weekly podcast does not help, but I don't know. Maybe once I outsource editing, then I'll have time to record a music CD.
Hey, you've got a built-in audience for your songs. Just put them out as bonus episodes.
Exactly.
Well, Andy, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this. But I'm just here kind of sitting in your seat. This is your show. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you really want to cover or that you really want to say to the audience before we sign off on your 100th episode?
Well, one, thank you, Jared, for being a part of this 100th episode celebration and commemoration. I thank each and every listener for tuning in to Inspired Money. This has just been so much fun. And I think that when it comes to one's money, that it seems super complex, but it's like you can boil it down to its most simple level. It's like you can either save more or you can make more. So don't spend frivolously. And as I mentioned earlier, it's about setting your priorities and you set your goals, because with that in mind, you can reach places that you're aiming for. And sometimes when you're lucky, you can even surpass where it is that you thought you could be. So keep it simple. The other message that I have is to do something every day that scares you, because getting out of your comfort zone really helps you to achieve more than you realize that you could.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. And here's to 100 more great episodes after this, and hopefully many more after that as well, Andy.
So I won't be sleeping anytime soon. Thanks, Jared.
Take care.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? As today's guest, I'm going to pass on picking a favorite Inspired Money moment. Thank you to Jared for being a great guest host, and thank you for joining me on this mission to better yourself and your money. Let me know your favorite Inspired Money moment and takeaway by posting in the private Inspired Money Makers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Check WeirdAl.com for current tour dates happening right now. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.